Welcome to the International Franchise Association's Women's Franchise Committee podcast, Her Success, the Stories of Female Franchise Leaders. I am Leanne Caruso with Entrepreneur Media, and today I am so excited and honored to be talking with Therese Thilgen, co-founder and CEO of Franchise Update Media. Thank you so much for joining us today, Therese.
Thank you, Leanne.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I've been a big fan of Franchise Update and of you for as long as I've been in franchising. So I am very happy that I'm the one that gets to do this interview with you today.
I am too. I'm really excited.
Good. So tell us a little bit about Franchise Update Media, and then we'll go into your story.
Yeah, Franchise Update Media is, an organization that is education driven. And so, and a lot of that goes back to why we started the company almost 35 years ago. But through conferences, through magazines, through web properties, e-newsletters, etc., that's how we deliver information to our particular constituencies, which are franchisors. That's really where we started, is providing content and education to franchisors, multi-unit franchisees and multi-brand franchisees became a target audience about 7 years after we started the company, because we saw this evolution of franchisees, whether they started as a mom and pop organization or not, starting to expand for a variety of reasons. And so we really jumped into that space in a big way, and have been doing that for 22 years. And then along the way, we also targeted, individuals that were looking to go into business for themselves. So again, those are our focus. And along the way, in providing that information, we look to vendors, suppliers that had services or products that they wanted to provide to those separate audiences. Does that kind of do it?
I think that does it. So I think because you've been, you're co-founder and you've been with the company for so long, I'm sure your story is part of this whole journey. But I'm curious to know before we launch into that, but how did you guys start the company? Did you start on a content foundation or an events foundation? Which came first?
We started on a content foundation.
Content foundation.
And this goes back. You want me to tell you a little bit about our story and how we came to that? Yeah. Okay, so after I graduated from the University of Santa Clara, Gary went to the University of Santa Clara as well. We were both on scholarships there. I was planning on going into marriage and family and marriage counseling. That was my goal. And, but prior to doing that, I had an opportunity to work in Switzerland. So I went to Switzerland and had a phenomenal experience, and then spent all the money I made there traveling. Came back and essentially had to get a part-time job so that I could afford to get some clothes to start the interviewing process for family and marriage counseling. And lo and behold, I ended up running into a good friend of mine from Santa Clara who said, "Hey, I've got a part-time cashier job. I need somebody immediately. I lost my head cashier. Why don't you take that?" So I did. It turned out the company was a franchise company. So this is 43 years ago, a quite different world than it is today. So I started working with that company, grew through the ranks, learned what franchising was. Most people didn't at that time know what a franchise was. And mine was in my experience was with a very large themed car wash company that at that time cost $500,000. And the founder of that company believed in me and I rose to the position of a vice president of franchise recruitment. I was with them for 7 years. The problem became that they became the leadership dictatorial. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. And I was dealing with the franchisees who were really not happy with the leadership of the company. And I clearly could not recruit any franchisees because the validation was sinking. So with that said, one day and by the way, I'm 5 months pregnant. Gary and I had married a few years before. I'm 5 months pregnant. I was making a good salary, had all kinds of benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And the CEO on the phone called me because I had gotten off a few calls with franchisees, and I was really making a case. We really need to support these franchisees more. I mean, these are huge investments, yada, yada, yada. And he called me an effing Pollyanna. So I went home. I was a mess, just crying my eyes out. And Gary said, why don't we do something about them? Give them your notice. And, why don't we just figure out what we're going to do? I did that. I gave them my notice. Well, in the year prior to that, my family, friends, everybody thought I was just nuts because I was pregnant. They're like, you're never going to get a job. Right. And we had also owned a franchise that Gary operated the 2 years prior to that. He had been with a Fortune 500 company for years in sales, and really wanted to go. He had the entrepreneurial spirit more than I ever did. And so we bought a franchise, and lo and behold, 6 months after we bought the franchise, opened our office, paid the franchise fee, etc., they shut the franchise down.
Oh, no.
And it turned out, and again, keep in mind, this is quite a while ago, that the people that they gave us to call, because they weren't, the FDD thing was still, not quite there. They used to call them Uniform Franchise Offering Circulars. That's how old I am. And the people that they had us call, they set them up. They set us up to get great reviews. So the bottom line is that became the impetus for us to say, wow, there's just not a lot of information out there. I think Entrepreneur Magazine, frankly, was the first magazine I remember seeing covering franchising, but it was just to this, this huge audience. So we decided to take our savings. We went through that quickly, by the way, if you talk about challenges, but we ended up figuring out that there's, first and foremost, franchisors need more information. We just couldn't find any. And need more information to be better and stronger, because that will impact everything. So it was all about the content and the messaging. And, it took us, I know one of the things, we've talked about are the challenges along the way. Well, we faced every challenge that you can possibly imagine. But that was the beginning of Franchise Update. And I wouldn't dare show anyone today the magazines from 35 years ago.
Still have them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we were typesetting back then.
Oh, wow.
Desktop publishing came in, and the computers were huge, right? Nothing was small then. And we had to pay typesetters and artists, and with all of the layers. There was none of the computer stuff happening at all. So it was quite a process. It was quite expensive, and we were burning through money like crazy because we went in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and really didn't understand how difficult it would be to
Right.
launch a publication in franchising. As a matter of fact, I still have a card from a woman that sent it to us after our first magazine. And she said, you know, your magazine isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Oh my goodness.
So those, you know, those are the things you learn, you know, along the way. And we took it very seriously and contacted this person to say, tell us what we can provide for you so that we can be better. And
Right.
then, you know, and then we did a lot of phone work and a lot more research. And, you know, we learned that, you know, everything we do has to be infused with research. And that's, you know, talking to the people we're targeting, reading, talking to people in the industry of publishing. And when I attended the first IFA convention, I think I've told you this before, Peter Shea, you know, who started Entrepreneur, really became an advocate for us. And that was very special.
I love that.
So, little background.
Here we are. What was your initial distribution? How did you get the magazines to people?
So I found out, we're based in California, that I learned this through it when I was working for the company I was with, that in the UFOCs, Uniform Franchise Offering Circulars, they published a list of franchisees. They were just starting to. More importantly, if I went to the Department of Corporations in California and a few other states, I could order, but I had to actually go there, a list of all franchisors registered in the state of California, which was big. There were about 1,000 of them. So I came back with, I don't even think they make this paper anymore, the printers that had the paper, you know, the light green and white paper that fed through with a million holes. Yeah. I had like a stack of this high, and we entered. We entered all of the franchisor addresses, and then we got them from other states. So frankly, I don't remember the exact amount of franchisors and then, you know, the different positions within, but I bet we might have started with 2,500. Like I said, it was a journey.
Yes. Wow. And then when did you, well, you obviously had to take the evolution to digital.
Yeah.
How much of a process was that?
You know, of course, the desktop publishing seriously brought our costs down, right? Sure. I mean, where you would, you know, literally print it out on a piece of paper and try and bold and highlight and do, you know, work a little magic. And we eventually hired somebody that could do it far better than we could. And so desktop publishing, you know, became the first computer, you know, usage we had in building our company. The internet came around, Leanne, you know better than me. How long has it been? 20 years?
At least.
At least, yeah. You know, maybe 25. But there's been an evolution there too.
Right.
And, you know, on how to create a website. We were all just trying to, you know, feel our way through this process. Sure. Everybody, any business owner, right? We were all trying to do it. And it was difficult. It was really difficult because you needed the, you know, the right name. So Franchise Update, someone had taken and then tried to sell it to us. Somebody in the industry, who was a lawyer, and tried to get us to pay for it. So we got another lawyer and then we got the name. But it was serendipitous when there was a company that owned the URL franchising.com years ago. And they owed us a bunch of money from advertising. and couldn't pay it. So they offered us it in exchange, franchising.com.
Wow.
So that URL was pretty powerful. And it's been through so many different migrations, right? You know this. And we know it will continue to, you know, migrate as everything in the digital world continues to advance, because technology is just moving so fast. But we used to have a site for franchisors, that was Franchise Update. We had multi-unit franchising, that was for multi-unit franchisees. And then we had franchising.com, okay, for prospective franchisees. And what we learned when and it was probably when Google became very active as a search engine, that based on the way they operated and the algorithms that they use, that it would be more prudent for us to get higher, you know, search rankings, because everything was organically driven, you know, by us then. So we combined everything under franchising.com. Mm-hmm. So then you'll find, you know, our different layers on that site. And again, we have a great tech team, and it's constant change. It's constant change to stay on top, you know, to get, number one, the information in, to repurpose the information, you know, dealing with tons of advertisers as you know, as entrepreneur is, but, you know, what's the best way to deliver the information? And the bottom line is, we realize you have to reach your different constituencies in the way they want to be reached. And then mobile came in, and that was a different game changer, right? Because you had to optimize everything so that, can you tell I'm Italian? I keep using my hands, put my hands down. You had to, I'm forgetting what you even call it now, you know, when you, where you can see everything and it works on mobile.
Right.
What is the word I'm looking for?
Mobile optimization.
Thank you. Yes. I think I got optimization right.
Got it right. Yeah.
And that continues to change, right?
Yes.
And then, you know, anyone in publishing knows when Google started, you know, taking, you know, wanted to really be a content maker.
Right. And
they really impacted the, you know, publishing companies or media companies with online presence. And so that was another game changer. And I credit our tech team for staying on top of the trends, and, you know, just managing change, because it's so dynamic.
Yeah, and you have such a robust site to begin with. So you started with yourself and Gary, and then how big is your team now?
We have, I think, 20, because we just hired somebody. I think we have 22. And of the 22, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are male.
Oh, out of the 22.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And that's, you know, we have employees in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, and in their 60s, and one that just turned 70. And I will tell you, you know, we're very fortunate, because with a team, and we'd like to call us, you know, the Franchise Update family, that we get different points of view, level of experiences, and they move both ways. You know, the youth, the younger, the tech savviness is sometimes mind-blowing, and it's absolutely necessary. And then you also bring in the wisdom of those of us that are on the upper side, having been in business and experienced change and the hard knocks and the challenges and the successes, the recessions and all that kind of stuff, to keep a lid and a level of calmness, when those things happen.
Yeah. And you have, I would say, fairly good retention as well. I mean, I think most people who interacts with Franchise Update knows the same people, the outward facing representative, have for a very long time. So you operate as a family. From what I understand.
And there's growth, that comes. Certainly there have been people that have gone away by their choice or our choice, right? And the people that have stayed, it's been important, of course, for them to see a growth path.
Right.
And I'm really proud of our team, and the people that are out there, making everything work, staying in touch with the customers, etc. And we are fortunate that we have this retention, especially based on everything that's been going on. We did not lose an employee as a result of COVID. Wow. We took action, but we did not lose an employee. They're all still with us.
That's wonderful. So tell me about some inspiring or empowering moments you've had along the way, or maybe one that particularly sticks out that kind of has helped shape your journey.
Yes, and this really comes from a business standpoint that impacts also your personal life. They are intertwined. And when we started noticing the trend of franchisees growing by default, not by design of the franchisor, but growing because they had a little bit more education or a little bit more savvy, but might have, opened one or two locations in a market and were strong enough financially and from a management standpoint. And this was after the great, all of the oh my God, when all of the recession of 20 plus years ago, I can't even keep them all straight right now. I think we've been through 3 or 4 since we've had the business, where the golden parachutes were taking place.
Right.
And so there was a much more educated, management-oriented skill set that came into the marketplace. In addition to those that had been in it already and were passionate about their business, and they wanted to grow. They wanted to, because they felt that they could. And franchisors originally weren't as receptive to having franchisees at too many units because they don't want the tail wagging the dog, so to speak. And, but, you had smart franchisees that could, have a great value and impact to the growth of a franchisor. So we really started following that, meeting people along the way. And what I recognized, and Gary too, is that because these franchisees have their money on the line, they were very open and honest about their challenges and their journeys. And whereas if you're in corporate America, right, which I had been to, and Gary also, you have to kind of balance what you can and can't say.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Right. Absolutely.
To protect that brand. And I think a lot of that's changed, actually, which I love, this level of more transparency today. So I was like, oh my God, when we felt a little bit, not a little bit, when we were overwhelmed or had to pull out our credit card in the early years to pay bills, and we're going through money like crazy, or, all of these things that we were dealing with, they were dealing with, and they talked about it.
Right.
And we talk about educating our, that we realized there was now time to break out content for existing franchisees, whether they were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that was probably the biggest, bright moment for me as a business owner, to identify and relate with people that you could talk to that were going through the same experiences. And I'll tell you, so many of them have become really good friends over the years, from the early days. So we launched the conference, the Multi-Unit Franchising Conference, 22 years ago. Very few people came to the party. And we realized it's because they don't know us. So then we got a lot of encouragement from the franchisees that were in attendance. We formed an advisory board of multi-unit franchisees, and that has grown over the years to define our content. But it was when we launched our magazine 2 years later, which we originally called Area Developer. Okay. And it was all about multi-unit franchisees. And then we moved it to multi-unit franchisee, because a very large Aaron's franchisee, who was Charles Smithgall, who got out of franchising a few years back, but he, at one of our board meetings in Las Vegas, 19 years ago, said, "I just have one question for you, Therese. Why don't you call the magazine Multi-Unit Franchisee?" And everyone at the table, and there were about 15 of us, said, "Oh my God, Charles, that's brilliant." And I said, "That's brilliant." So the very next issue, we made all those changes. And that is when we started getting traction. And it was very difficult to find any addresses of multi-unit franchisees at that time. So it was very much an organic effort, word of mouth, etc. And of course, when the internet became more popular, there was just all these different ways we could reach these folks, because the bottom line is the UFOCs, now the FDDs, have the names of locations, not of corporate America. Not of the corporate offices. And so, we made the big mistake. It was a great, education for us years ago, that we purchased a list of UFOCs and mailed tens of thousands, but they weren't getting to the right people. Oh, because they were the store locations. Mm-hmm. And so, again, challenges along the way, figured them out. Mm-hmm. And it's still a process, to make sure that you're reaching all of the right people. But our list has grown substantially. Multi-unit franchisees, of course, then word of mouth is big. And now, franchisors that were reluctant to sponsor the event, because they did not to sponsor the event or encourage their franchisees to come to learn, because the programming is for franchisees and growth, right? And right. how to choose a new location, what operationally, what changes when you add another brand or a third brand or a fourth brand. We're very reluctant to bring franchisees, and that now has flipped, because there's so much good information, and that's what we're about.
That's great. In closing, can you tell us what Franchise Update has to offer for the rest of the year?
Well, we are launching a couple of new e-newsletters, one on labor and one on real estate, and another on the franchise consumer experience. And because a lot going on in all of those areas, of course. Right. Franchise consumer experience relates directly to the conference that we're going to be holding in June in conjunction. We partnered with the IFA on the first franchise customer experience conference, and we're really excited about that. And then at the end of the year, in October, we have our annual franchise leadership and development conference, and we have partnered with the IFA on that as well, so that there's, so that we can condense great content and not have franchisors have to make so many, different choices. So we're really excited about that. So in terms of conferences, that's where we're at.
That's great. I am so excited about the new Franchise Consumer Experience Conference and seeing how the partnership with the IFA is going to come together. But it has always been my favorite event of the year. So I'm excited to see how it's evolving.
Thank you.
And yeah, that's right. And just a couple minutes left. What if you could tell yourself one thing, your 20-year-old self, if you could tell yourself one thing, what would that be?
Along the journey, don't sweat the small stuff.
That's a good one. It's hard to see when you're in it.
It's hard to see.
Yes.
It comes with age.
Yeah. Well, Therese, thank you so much for joining us on the Women's Franchise Committee podcast. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you maybe in New York at IFE, but definitely in Atlanta at the Franchise Consumer Experience Conference. And if anybody has any information, where can they, or wants to see information about the conference, where can they go?
They can go to francxc.com.
And always, for any education and resources, go to franchising.com.
That's correct. They could find us there too. And I thank you, Leanne, and I thank the IFA and the WFN.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.